All right, after last week's assassination attempt of multiple Republicans at baseball practice in Virginia, why is the left just now being called out as extremists, some would wonder. Vice News ran with this headline, quote, extremism experts are starting to worry about the left. Should they worry more about the left than the extremists on the right? Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer is a former CIA-trained intel officer and senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and joins us right now. You see some similarities between what's happening with radical Islamists and what's happening in the left?
Absolutely. Look, you've got a pathology which ISIS has used very well. You have a very, very radical methodology and philosophy put out. Some people believe it. Then it's reinforced by the media. The media picks up the message, and you have essentially a desensitization going where you become numb to what you're seeing. That's what happened here in the United States and where the left is going. And this is not going to make a lot of people happy, but when you see leaders on the left calling for essentially rising up and they allow for Antifa to do all the violence that they do, and then you have the beheading of the president virtually by Kathy Griffith and this play where President Trump is killed. Brian, you have a certain percentage of the population who's going to buy into that, who become completely desensitized, become completely radicalized, and act. And if we don't, and again, Vice is not considered a conservative outlet. If they're starting to see it, we've been talking about this behind the scenes for months. If they're starting to see it, the problem is very severe, and it's not going to get any better until someone does something to attenuate the rhetoric.
Well, Colonel, I'll give you some other examples.
Sure.
Protesters turned violent on the anti-Sharia march. Who would think that people would have a problem with an anti-Sharia march in America? The Berkeley riots, both of them resulted in violence. And the protesters attacked Trump supporters outside a rally in San Jose. So we're seeing it over and over again. But some listening right now will say, hey, what about that? What about the Shakespeare play in the park? We saw Republicans rush the stage over there yesterday. And what if one of those guys was armed?
And just like we saw in London, Brian, someone taking justice in their own hands. This is the issue. If the governments who are responsible for our common welfare, common good, and defense are shown to be ineffective, people on the opposite side are going to rise up. So what you see here is the automatic response, force on force, of certain folks coming back to essentially create, to retaliate. So again, the pathology is clear. If one side begins to act violently, you have inevitably the other side starting to come back. It always happens. So we have to understand if the government does not stop the violence on the left, you'll see more violence on the right and retaliation. It's inevitable.
Colonel, you fight in war zones. People are getting way too crazy about politics. These are a difference in philosophy. We shouldn't be shooting at each other and trying to stab each other, rushing in stages. It's out of control. Hopefully rational people will dial it back.
Hopefully.
I didn't think I'd have to tap into your terrorism knowledge for these segments, but sadly we do. Thanks, Colonel.
Hey, thanks, Brian.